We have finally come to the last book of the new prophecy. A large and bland book with very little overall plot or even character growth save for the bits of build-up to the one scene everyone remembers, Brambleclaw killing Hawkfrost to save Firestar. You may notice I'm not drawing that though, and that's because I committed early on to drawing one underrated scene from the book for each episode of Trip Through Time. A still interesting moment that just isn't drawn about or talked as much in the fandom. But this book, with its next-to-no material, made that quite difficult. Sunset came out on December 26th of 2005, almost exactly 4 months after Twilight. As with all the other books in this arc that weren't Dawn, this one was written by Cherith Baldry, which is about the only meta thing I'd like to say here, except that by this point, the team not only knew that they would be making a third arc, but had some ideas of exactly what it would be like, allowing them to foreshadow a few key elements. Greystripe is once again listed as deputy. Not a surprise at this point, and Cinderpelt is gone, leaving Leafpool as ThunderClan's only medicine cat. Sootfur is dead and Sorreltail has gone off to the nursery, so the clan now has 11 warriors instead of 13. Birchpaw joined Whitepaw in the apprentice den. In addition to Ferncloud and now Sorreltail, Daisy is also a newcomer in the nursery. And one last note is that Willowpaw has been listed as Mothwing's apprentice in RiverClan. The top 10 characters have 69% of the lines, which is almost the lowest percentage of the arc, second only to Moonrise. And this time around, 44% of the characters are she-cats, and combined they have 43% of the lines. Less than last book, certainly. Now, quickly, let's get into the story, because there's a lot I have to say about this book. The prologue opens for the first time, not in StarClan, but somewhere else, where Tigerstar and Darkstripe find each other and Tigerstar explains his plans to continue in his revenge against Firestar, by having his sons, Brambleclaw and Hawkfrost, destroy him and take over their own clans, and the others, which begins by training them in fighting while they dream. While Tigerstar is confident in Hawkfrost, he is worried about Brambleclaw's loyalty to Firestar leading him astray, but is confident that, with teaching, he can use the respect he has gained as leader of the Sundrown Place journey to take over the clans with ease. Darkstripe offers to help, but Tigerstar refuses and explains that cats in this place must walk alone. Literally. Back in the living world, Stormfur and Brook have come from the tribe, and other than telling Brambleclaw that they'd like to help ThunderClan after their badger attack, they don't explain why they're at the lake and not with the tribe at all. Leafpool and Crowfeather go their separate ways now that Leafpool must stay with ThunderClan to be their medicine cat, and Crowfeather promises that he will never forget her. The clan mourns Cinderpelt and Sootfur, and Sorreltail names her kits, Mousekit, Poppykit, Honeykit, and Cinderkit, after Cinderpelt. Daisy, seeing the levels of danger the clan was just in, wants to take her kits back to the horse place, and Midnight leaves. Then, ridiculously quickly and with no resolution after all that happened in Twilight, Squirrelflight and Brambleclaw just get together and Squirrelflight says she'll talk to Ashfur. We have only just finished Chapter 2. Leafpool and Brightheart make up, and then Leafpool receives a vision showing Brambleclaw and Squirrelflight walking off into the sunset as a couple, tails entwined. Then, while trying to think of how to tell Squirrelflight about Brambleclaw being in the dark forest, Spotted Leaf interrupts to say that it's not her fault that Leafpool took her comment as meaning she should go with Crowfeather instead of stay with her clan, and either way it turned out fine, and StarClan isn't angry, so it's all absolutely perfectly fine, right? Squirrelflight breaks off whatever budding relationship she had with Ashfur, and, while on patrol, they find out that fox traps exist on their territory. Ashfur, by the way, is not taking the breakup well and is now avoiding Squirrelflight altogether. Brambleclaw meets up with Hawkfrost and Tigerstar again in his dreams, and both of Brambleclaw's family members help him think of ways to manipulate Firestar into making him deputy, which includes deciding that he will mentor Berrykit so he can fulfill the deputy requirement. He then lies about where his injuries are coming from to Squirrelflight. Leafpool gets a slightly ominous dream where a bunch of StarClan cats say that something bad is coming for her, and they don't know what, but they will be with her regardless. It bears a striking resemblance to the dream where Cinderpelt was told she would die, but without the specificity of her fate. Seeing that it could help him become the kit's mentor, Brambleclaw helps out in finding Berrykit, who has lost part of his tail to a fox trap, and Brook plays the most important role in the rescue, but Brook and Stormfur then decide to go to RiverClan and stay at the lake for good. RiverClan has Greencough, Cinderpelt is nowhere to be found in StarClan, ShadowClan tries to steal a strip of territory, Willowpaw becomes an official medicine cat apprentice, and Mothwing shares a prophecy she supposedly got about 2 stones blocking the river, which gets Brook and Stormfur kicked back out of RiverClan. Interesting, considering she doesn't believe in StarClan and needs Mudfur to deliver prophecies through Leafpool and now Willowpaw. Turns out that Hawkfrost pressured her into giving that false prophecy out of a worry that Stormfur would be chosen as deputy over him, but Mothwing decides to stop listening to him after the gathering. Tawnypelt is also much later than her brothers, brought to Tigerstar, but she refuses his training and leaves like a sensible person. She tries to talk some sense into Brambleclaw too after finding him there, but he can't hear her over the sound of his raging ambition and blatantly lies about how well he knew Tigerstar when he was alive so that he can continue his training. Daisy leaves quietly now that Berrykit has directly been hurt by being in the clans, but Cloudtail and Brambleclaw go to get her back, which, with the eager pleading of her kits, Daisy agrees to. Leafpool and Feathertail help Willowpaw get acquainted with StarClan in her dreams and begin that side of her training, and finally, Daisy and Brightheart resolve their feelings, with the former explaining that Cloudtail would have been this nice to anyone, and she was just jealous of the closeness Cloudtail and Brightheart shared. This does fit well with Daisy's existing perception of how close Smoky and Floss are and how she would never be a part of it, but in the Cloudtail case it doesn't work, because for the last 2 books he actually has been neglecting Brightheart in favor of spending every moment with Daisy and her kids. And he has never before, and will never again, display this level of kindness to other random cats. I'm glad to see the plotline over, but it's not an ending that was deserved. A few more chapters of border trouble with absolutely no substance go by. Stormfur and Brook are made official members of ThunderClan, Brambleclaw makes Firestar appointed deputy, the clan mourns Greystripe, and Leafpool receives a prophecy saying that the deputy should be Brambleclaw himself, despite him not having an apprentice yet. Ashfur disagrees, but the clan welcomes him more or less, and Brambleclaw is officially made deputy. With that in place, Tigerstar and Hawkfrost are ready to move forward with their plan. Brambleclaw isn't quite sure yet, so he suggests they talk about it in the real world. After another Medicine Cat meeting, where Leafpool finds out that Cinderpelt's spirit is in Cinderkit, it is finally time for the scene. Brambleclaw comes across Hawkfrost standing over Firestar, who he has caught in a fox trap, and asks Brambleclaw to finish him off. Also, Leafpool is there witnessing it. Brambleclaw says no, and tries to free Firestar, but it is revealed that this was a test, and Hawkfrost attacks. They fight, and Brambleclaw kills him, making his blood run into the lake and turning it red, satisfying the prophecy. Brambleclaw is told that he is a wonderful deputy, and the book ends with Squirrelflight and Leafpool now sure that he's a great and loyal cat. I'd like to briefly run down what we learn about the Dark Forest in this book, considering it is the last time you will ever see this version of the evil afterlife. Keep in mind that, in Sunset, it is just the, or a, or Tigerstar's Dark Forest, not capitalized, and isn't ever given a proper name or referred to as the place of no stars. In that place, it is always dark, there is no moon and no stars in the sky, and there is also no prey to catch at all. Essentially, the reverse of StarClan. Second, like StarClan, cats here are immortal and won't become sick or hungry, but they cannot leave their afterlife to go back to the living world. They can, however, learn to bring cats in through their dreams, as StarClan cats can. An additional important note is that one big punishment factor here is that the cats are kept apart from each other. It is implied that Tigerstar's meeting with Darkstripe in the prologue is Darkstripe's first since dying, and one of only a couple of meetings Tigerstar has ever had. While they can catch sense of other residents of the forest, they rarely, if ever, get the chance to meet any of them. Alright, Brambleclaw analysis time. First things first, he is not as bad as he was in Twilight. Instead, he spends practically every waking moment in this book vehemently declaring to himself how loyal he is to ThunderClan and Firestar. However, considering that he simultaneously trains with his father and Hawkfrost, and how he constantly pushes for Firestar to make him deputy and for Berrykit to become his apprentice, it feels like something else. His attitude, taking the kit's disappearance as an exciting opportunity and taking Firestar's grief as a barrier stopping him from getting the position he deserves, makes it feel more like denial. A way to convince himself that he's still in the right, even as he does bad things for bad reasons. Someone who is truly motivated solely, or even mainly, by loyalty wouldn't push so hard on a grieving leader and take it as personal when they are slightly delayed on getting a very rare and exclusive position that they are not in any way guaranteed. This doesn't mean that he's automatically a horrible cat. He did make the right choice eventually. But it does mean that he is deeply flawed. Brambleclaw has a very strong ambition, much like his father, which drives him to care less for the cats around him and make allowances for bad actions in cats when they could get him what he wants. Let's be clear that this isn't a bad character. Having a morally flawed or even a morally corrupt protagonist could be really interesting. And many of these tendencies show up again in different forms in Hollyleaf, my absolute favorite character. The issue here is that everything Brambleclaw does is presented as correct, and he is rewarded for his behavior rather than punished. The story never seems to acknowledge or even realize that what he does is a serious problem rather than a quick little mistake thanks to Tigerstar's manipulation. These are genuine faults in Brambleclaw's mindset, and his usage of politeness and self-declarations to his own loyalty and goodness are all being used to conceal, even from himself, the immorality of his actions. These are faults not with the world around him believing that he is like Tigerstar, which, for the most part, they simply don't. but with Brambleclaw actually having tendencies to behave similarly to Tigerstar and fighting against that impulse. But he shouldn't be rewarded for just not choosing to murder his leader after a moon or more of terrible actions, especially considering the context. Brambleclaw violates the deputy must mentor an apprentice rule and didn't really succeed in bringing the traveling group together in any ways they hadn't already been or didn't do on their own. In my opinion, the best way to end this sort of character's arc would have been for him to deny his father's path and instead work to build up real loyalty in himself, letting someone else take the position of deputy. As for our other point of view character, Leafpool is back for 10 of the 23 chapters, and she is now officially the only character to have been a point of view in every new prophecy book. This is a little odd to say, honestly, because I couldn't accurately call her the largest or most important character of the series. That would go to Brambleclaw, and perhaps Squirrelflight as well, or anyone else on the Sundrown journey. For the first 3.5 books, Leafpool was just there to be our eyes into the world that the traveling group left behind, and in the last 2.5 books she hasn't done much substantial work, especially insofar as this arc's plot is concerned. In one chapter, she found the Moonpool. In another 2 chapters, she got to help Mothwing and RiverClan. In 2 more chapters, she got to spend time with Crowfeather, and 2 more chapters on either end of that journey were spent on them pining for a life together that they could never have. For the rest of the time, she kept working her role as an eye into ThunderClan, particularly the lives of Cinderpelt, Brightheart, Cloudtail, Daisy, Sorreltail, and Brackenfur. She never had the majority of chapters in any book, and it is only in Twilight where I could even call her one of the most prominent characters in the story, thanks to that book focusing on nothing but relationship drama. Her involvement in Brambleclaw's affairs is particularly jarring. She commiserated with Squirrelflight about his behavior and closeness to Hawkfrost. She directly saw him and Hawkfrost training with Tigerstar. She was there to witness Brambleclaw and Hawkfrost nearly killing Firestar. And she received all 3 prophecies about Brambleclaw. The Blood Will Spill Blood prophecy, the one about him and Squirrelflight getting together, and the last about him becoming deputy. She never does anything with any of this information, and in fact barely speaks to him at all. Having a camera into side characters isn't ideal, but it's relatively normal. However, having her camera focus on a main character who could have given his perspective himself, or instead of giving another relevant character like Squirrelflight the ability to learn about or comment on his behaviors, is really strange and counterproductive. She wasn't ever an unimportant character, but it feels like the time given to her consistently throughout the arc could have been better divided among more of the traveling group, or expanding to other clans in their own drama. A side and slightly less important note that I've been ignoring since Twilight is the discussion of Cloudtail, Brightheart, and Daisy. When Daisy arrived, Cloudtail exhibited strong interest in her and began spending a lot of time with her and her kits, sometimes doing what could easily be seen as flirting. Brightheart was jealous of this and began taking out her feelings by stepping in more at the medicine den at Leafpaw's expense, and by silently expressing her displeasure with glares, grunts, and snarls whenever Cloudtail and Daisy act close in front of her. Daisy, meanwhile, seems at times overly eager to rely on Cloudtail and use him as her only protection for her and her kits. This is a very uncomfortable plotline, to say the least, especially with how rushed the resolution is at the end. Cloudtail's intense care and loyalty to Brightheart, along with his sensitivity to her feelings specifically, was one of their most consistent and touching elements in the first arc, so seeing that seemingly discarded for this plotline alone is strange and damaging to our view of the characters. Brightheart acting catty and vindictive whenever she sees them together also felt deeply out of character. But Daisy doesn't come away unscathed either. As a new character, every action she takes defines in our minds who she is and who she could become, and this clinginess and opposition to a character we are meant to sympathize with leads us towards disliking her immediately, when it would be a much greater benefit to keep her as a sympathetic character, seeing as she comes from a completely different background than any other cat in the clan and could provide unique experiences if she's allowed to become part of it. A lot of this book is, once again, fluff. A few very small plots like Berrykit's escape, Daisy leaving with her kits, Stormfur and Brooke's placement, and the struggle at the ShadowClan border each last only a couple chapters and have no impact on the plot or characters, instead just being there to fill time. I had a lot to say about this book, considering it is the culmination of everything the arc had, at least in its latter half, but not a lot happened, and a lot of even my discussion was on the space it wasted and how many mistakes over the arc have led the story in this book to be so far off track. The arc as a whole didn't have much grounding, its cast and plot wildly fluctuated from book to book, and very few meaningful relationships or character developments were established and kept from each book to the next. The overall plot of the arc ended halfway through it, and since then it has been staggering along as it tried to fill the space with random new elements and a brand new evil afterlife to tempt a character whose first arc version would never have been in this situation, and whose current version is being praised for things he should be punished for. But now that the arc is over, for better or worse, the clans are at the lake. Brambleclaw is the ThunderClan deputy, and he and Squirrelflight are together while Leafpool and Crowfeather broke up after a single night. Now we have the chance to move on to the next arc, Power of Three. An arc that is a major turning point in the series in many ways, and one that is deeply nostalgic to a lot of fans, myself included. I am more than glad to leave the New Prophecy behind, and continue on to the site in the next episode of our trip through time.